Welcome everyone to MaleFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 8. It is called When We Are in Need. So full spoilers for the episode, as always. And it, of course, is the penultimate episode. Next week is the finale. This is an episode that I think those of us who have played the game were kind of, I wouldn't say excited, that's maybe not the right word, but certainly anticipating because of the content that it had, because of David, because of the character of David. We knew he was coming. We knew that we were going to be dealing with the darkest part of the whole story, pretty much, in this episode. And this definitely is the darkest episode. I don't think there's any debate in that. And it's obviously quite extreme. Ellie is put into a very threatening position, and it ramps up over the course of the episode. It kind of shows you the dangers of this post-apocalyptic world in a way that's been kind of hinted at like once or twice, but we've not really seen. We've seen the violence of people and that people can't be trusted, but this idea of it going beyond that and it being even more monstrous and something that you can't even like comprehend. You know, it's not just cruel. It's monstrous. It's the best word I can think of to describe it. So. So David's a character we have to talk about, and we have to talk about how he fits into the story and in the sense of the themes. You know, we've been talking a lot this entire show in these videos. I've been bringing up constantly the themes of love, of revenge, of like what makes you a bad person and justifying your actions because it's out of love or for some person you love. You know, those kinds of things, right? And I think David represents the extreme end of the justification part, where, you know, characters in this show have been shown to justify some bad things to varying degrees because they're doing something to protect someone they care about. Henry did a bad thing to protect Sam. Joel, of course, we know, did bad things. They even drove his brother away, but he did them to protect his brother, right? And obviously the idea that Joel was maybe a little like thrown off and he wasn't quite in the right headspace anymore, and it took Tommy getting away to sort of get out of that, and then Joel to find him again and see how he is without him, to maybe realize that he was perhaps like going too far or doing things that he shouldn't have been. But at the time he could justify it, right? Everyone's been justifying stuff. There's more examples throughout the entire show, the entire story. David is justifying horrific things, and he claims he's doing it because people rely on him, because there's an entire group of people that he's supposed to protect. This is a man who is not fulfilled by one person, right? This is also someone who is, this is not love. Let me make that's clear. What David feels for people is not love. He feels obsessed. He feels a hunger for people. I mean, literally, in this case, I didn't mean that, but that's quite funny. No, he hungers for people. So, you know, all the examples we've had this season, by and large, have been for maybe a couple, but mostly it's been one person. Joel was, you know, cared about Tommy. He, in theory, was supposed to care about Tess, and now he's becoming to care about Ellie. Henry cared about Sam. Bill cared about Frank, right? Over and over again, we keep getting different examples of their one person being a protector for the other person that they love, whatever type of love that may be. That's been there over and over again. And all of those have, in some way or another, led to examples of someone doing something bad and justifying it because they need to protect the person they love, so they see it as just. David has a flock of people. He claims he's needed by all these people, and he has to do bad things to protect this entire group of people who will then treat him like their cult leader, their king, their father, as he very much wants to be called, but at least a couple of them specifically. He's someone who he would not be satisfied with one person who actually cares about him. He claims he does. He claims that Ellie could be that because he says that she's his equal and that he recognizes some of himself in her, which is a vile thought. I don't think he would be satisfied. I think he thinks that he can find someone like that, in theory, that could fill this role that he's got in his head. But I think he would just not be satisfied still, and he would have to keep aiming for something even greater. But he's got this entire group of people right? He doesn't have one person. He has a group of people, and he's still not satisfied. He still doesn't feel like he's he has the connection that he wants, because he can't connect, because he can't feel love. It's not real love. It's well, it's a sickness, really, more than anything else. So you have this extreme end, and you also have this character who we find out when he's talking about his backstory about being a teacher. I'm kind of like combining two conversations together here. There's the one with Ellie early on, just before we find out, or she realizes and finds out that their dead guy was, the one that Joel killed, and therefore she has to be concerned. He's telling her some of his backstory there, and then later on when she's in the cage and he's becoming more overt about things, and he's talking about the violence in his heart, he talks about how he had that in him before the apocalypse, and he kind of like basically repressed it. He sort of dealt with it and struggled with it, but after the apocalypse he basically saw the light and became emboldened, and he kind of sees what the fungus is doing is love. That's what he calls love, and it'll kill and do horrible things to protect, and it'll use violence to protect. This is again the extreme end of justifying actions with in the name of love, but of course it isn't with him. And I do get the impression that he did, I kind of believe him with the implication that he didn't act on any of these urges before the apocalypse. That's not to say that sexual molesters and people who, use others and become sort of a zealot cult leader, like, obviously those things exist before the apocalypse, but it does kind of feel that this is a guy who was unleashed because of the apocalypse. He found himself able to, because he's good at talking, he can be confident, he can come across as relatively friendly. There are hints throughout the episode, that he isn't, of course, and that some of them are scared of him, but he can talk with this degree of comfort and confidence, which kind of draws people in. And it's important that before he kind of reveals to Ellie that the connection that her and Joel have to his group, that Ellie is kind of starting to smell a little bit in the conversation. She's starting to like sort of go along and ask questions. She's effectively been lured into bonding with him, and he's almost he almost could get away with it to an extent if he just kind of kept going without telling her the part that his entire group want revenge for losing one of their own. He's very good at drawing people in, and that's something he tries to do with Ellie, even after she knows a lot of truths, even after she knows that they're eating people, that they're cannibals. He does point out that only him and a few of the others know they're cannibals, and everyone else. But it's so if you watch the episode again, you'll notice the camera really focuses on the pot of meat being, the stew being made, and much like as well, actually, the close up of when David like touches the young girl's hand after he slaps her at the dinner. Like there's a real sort of like emphasis on like the physical contact, which, and because I knew where it was going, even in the first watch, I got a little bit of a shiver when he did that. It was very uncomfortable, and then obviously that leads to the actual hand touching with Ellie later on, which satisfyingly ends with him getting his finger broken by Ellie, which it's hard. Obviously Ellie's a character that's been easy to root for this entire time anyway. But when you give her like a real proper detestable villain, it's like, okay, right, it's like, kill the MFer, do it. Like, any way you can, do it. Obviously it's traumatic, she has to go through, it's vile, but on a simple rooting for a hero against a villain, it's it doesn't get much more black and white than this. I don't think. Like, this is pretty clear cut. The dinner itself, like, that's the other thing. If we're looking at David as a character, like, I almost like let out a laugh when I saw his plate of food at the dinner. The fact that the entire group had to wait for him to get there before they could eat, and they all have this little ration portion in a bowl, and I get that they're rationing, but then you see his plate and it's like just this full plate of food. Like, he gets the king's share. All of a sudden you sort of realize, oh, that's why everyone else looks worse than him, because they're all eating much, much less than he is. He's got a full stomach while everyone else is struggling. So the hypocrisy, like, he's doing his religious preaching and the Lord shall provide and all that bollocks, and he is taking his lion's share. I don't think it's that weird a connection that someone who leads a cult is also a complete I'll just say pedophile. I mean, that's not sugarcoat it. That's what he is. But that those two things do seem to go relatively hand in hand. I would say, and like the build up to everything going down, like the small little moments where it takes its turn, where she's in the cage and he's talking about like he needs an equal, he's surrounded by sheep. It's interesting, this is the second time in 2 weeks that someone has implied that Ellie could be a leader, because we had the Federate agent last time say that, this guy, David says it here, and obviously like he is a monster, but that doesn't necessarily mean that his observation in that particular point is necessarily invalid. That's an interesting little thing to have like two very different people say about Ellie back to back. I think that's a very intentional choice. Obviously it's very like it's very nail biting, even knowing what was going to happen, like her sneaking around the booths in the restaurant area where he's chasing her down with the cleaver in his hand. Super thrilling. Obviously the fire just makes it more dramatic, and there's that great shot of him in silhouette when she's sneaking up behind him and the fire's on the background. That stuff looks great. And Ellie, the performance from Bella Ramsey throughout the entire episode, when she's trying to act tough early on, when she's bargaining for medicine for Joel, her fighting back and being ferocious in the cage. Ellie, tell them Ellie's the little girl who bit your effing finger or broke your effing finger. That is like a fist pumping, like, yeah, she's our badass, she's our hero. You want to root for her. All that stuff's great, but it's the last couple scenes though that get you. It's the just unleashed rage as she hacks David to pieces with the cleaver. And there's a very simple change here from the game, actually. It's not a big deal, but in the game, Joel comes up and grabs her while she's still hacking away at David. That's where he grabs her and holds her and says, "It's okay, baby girl, I've got you." That's what happens in the game. In the show, of course, as you've seen, she goes outside, she finishes hacking and walks outside, and then Joel runs into her there, and we have the hug moment outside. It's not a big difference, but it's an interesting little thing where they chose to not have Joel even be in the room where David was. Joel never even meets David here. He barely met him in the game, really, but the idea that Ellie finishes it on her own, like she has to win this fight completely on her own, that was true in the game as well, to be fair, but like Joel doesn't even see him. Like she comes out, and this is an experience that from beginning to end was only hers. And the performance from Ramsey is fantastic. The rage and the hacking scene, and then outside, the way she realizes it's Joel, and she tries to tell Joel what's just happened, but she can't even get the words out, and she's just saying he she's like starting to speak but just can't get any further. Fantastic. And there's a great little touch here that I love, is when Joel hugs her and he says the line that everyone remembers from the game, "I've got you, baby girl." When he's hugging her, the shot looking at him in the back of her head as he's hugging her, very notable, and I'm sure this is intentional. His watch, because it's on his wrist, is like right like in the middle of the frame. It's like, it's quite clear, because that watch represents his daughter that he lost, right? And that's been a thing that was introduced in episode 1, that was brought up a couple times, obviously in the flashback, and then again Ellie pointed out that his watch was broken, and then here as he's hugging her, that watch is front and center. This is him, like, they are father and daughter now, in pretty much every way possible at this point, except biological, obviously. But this is like, he'd already kind of accepted her, of course, but now they've been through a trauma together. But unlike Sarah, he's not lost Ellie. She's been through an experience that will have changed her, I am sure. But yeah, I like, honestly, it's kind of daunting to even talk about this, because it does go to this dark place where David tries to rape her, right? It's like it's a horrible moment, but it's an effective one in establishing there would be people like that out there. If not specifically predators going after children, there certainly would be people out there who would be dangerous in this manner in the post-apocalypse. And the show's not like overdone it in that element. It's kind of saved it for this one really nasty character. It's presented him in a way that's very much a learning experience, where like this could have been in a way Joel, right? This, like, the person she ran into could have been someone, she was lucky to find Joel. If anything, she's going to feel even luckier that she found Joel after this experience, because it could have been David she ran into instead. It could have been David that was given the task of transporting her, and just how different would the story be if that was the case? It's but like I say, it's very daunting to talk about this, and all the scenes where it's just Ellie and David talking to each other are very edge of your seat. As it slowly kind of unravels how much of a threat he is. The moment he puts his hand on her hand, and you kind of like feel your heart sink a little bit when you realize where he's going with this. And he's already, the dialogue's already starting to inch towards it, because he's saying, "You could be my friend, my equal," and it's like, sounds like you want a queen. Like it sounds like, and obviously given the way he treats everyone else, and the way we saw him hit the other girl, and say, "I am your father now," effectively. I can't imagine that like Ellie would be treated as an equal, even if he sees that in her, right? I don't believe it for a second. And like I said earlier, it doesn't mean that everything he said was bullshit necessarily. What he says about Ellie being smart, being resourceful, and being loyal, like those things do actually track. In fact, the episode makes a point of showing you this. Her diverting the hunting party away from Joel and sort of making herself bait so that they don't go into where Joel is when he's like helpless, is like her being very like sacrificial for the sake of Joel, because she cares about him. This showed just how much she does care about Joel and how much she's willing to fight for him, and she tries to make that run in the horse. And and that's the other thing, of course, is that Troy Baker, or sorry, I should say James, wants to shoot her when she's lying there, and David kind of saves her. And I think, like, if you don't know where it's going, you might read that as, oh, maybe he's not that bad because he's not, like, he's saving her life. They want just vengeance and he's not having that. But of course, we find out it's because he's got his own agenda. This is a horrible thing to compare it to, but this is just like him getting his full plate of meat. He wants Ellie alive for himself. No one else gets their vengeance because of that. I mean, he offers up Joel, obviously, but that again, it's this idea of like him getting what he wants. Like, this entire system is designed so that he gets whatever he wants, and he gets to feel important. He gets to feel, because that's the other thing. When I was comparing him earlier to like all these other characters have the one person they care about and they'll do anything for, and sometimes they'll do bad things. David has an entire flock of people because he likes feeling like he's relied upon like that. I don't think any of the other characters that I'm talking about here, Henry, Joel, Bill, whoever, I don't think any of them like that they have to be like that, or they don't feel a satisfaction. I mean, obviously, if you care about someone and you've successfully protected them, there's an element of satisfaction there. But if anything, the lens that we've been looking through of those characters is that of fear, that Bill was scared of losing Frank. Joel didn't want to connect to anyone because he lost a daughter and he's scared of losing someone else. It's more this burden of fear because now you care about something, you care about someone, and it can be taken from you. So because of that, it's this kind of like, weight on your shoulders. It's this kind of like responsibility you feel. With David, it's the opposite. With David, it's this like, he wants to feel that important. He wants to feel like he is that special to everyone that's under him, and that he is this big guy that everyone has to look up to. He relishes in it. It's something he's feeding off of. It's part of what he desires, effectively. Whether or not he knew that before he started doing it, or if it's something he's just sort of gradually gotten more of a taste for as he's done it, is open for debate. But like, I think that's something that I would certainly say about him. And again, that's kind of part of what shows you that it's not real, that it's not love. He doesn't love these people that he's quote unquote protecting or looking out for. He is feeding off of them. It's a one-way relationship. It's a one-way thing, which kind of also feeds in. That's what you would say, a victim and a predator. That's not a relationship. It's a one-sided thing. It's one person wants something out of the other person, enforces it, and the other person has no say in that. And it kind of feels like that's just David to a T with everyone to an extent. And that's certainly what he tries to do with Ellie. He talks about her being equal, but he's not going to treat her that way. I feel like there's probably like essays and essays that could be written about this relationship and this character and how he views the world differently to everyone else and how he feeds off of other people. but fundamentally that's what I come back to time and time again when talking about him. It's just that it's not love, it's this like him feeding off the other person instead of love being this thing that both parties like share and feel something for, and it can be this burden, but it's something that ultimately gives you reason, where with David it isn't. So, and all the other obvious things you could say about it. But yeah, obviously very heavy. Obviously there's a couple of great Joel scenes in this as well. Him torturing the two guys to find out where the resort is to go find Ellie. I did, I kind of enjoyed it, and it's maybe like, again, we're seeing some of that darker side of Joel come out, because, and this is the thing, the story is orchestrated to this point where he is getting violent, he is getting dark. The way he tortures the guy and stabs him in the leg, and then beats the other guy to death with a pole, which, by the way, the line where the guy says, I ain't going to tell you shit, and he's like, don't worry, that's okay, I believe him. The first guy gave him the information about the map. The don't worry, I believe him is a great line. But it is a very dark scene, and it's very violent, and I think the audience in general are rooting for him here because they want Ellie to be saved. They want Joel to get to her. And obviously, the more fulfilling part of the episode is that Joel doesn't walk in and save her. Ellie saves herself. She did this on her own, but I think this idea of us rooting for Joel to do violent things, to be this monster again, to be this bad person, because it's worth it to save Ellie because she deserves to be saved, is a very interesting thing to play with, and certainly something that is going to play into the themes as we go down into more of the story. So it's hard not to be. I know the whole story. I know where it's going, and it doesn't matter. I'm right here going like, yeah, Joel left them up. Like, they've got it coming. Like, you go through that town. Because when you play this part in the game, like, you actually do have to like kill a bunch of the people in this community as you're trying to get to Ellie when you're playing Joel's side of it, and you feel motivated. You're like, I'm going to kill every one of you and I'm going to save her. Like, that's what you feel inside, and I think you get a little bit of that here when you're kind of rooting for Joel, even though he is kind of being a psychopath in the way that he's going about doing it. But that's kind of what this world is. It's pushed all these people to. Some people might critique that a couple of shots of penicillin shouldn't have gotten Joel that relatively healthy again that quickly. I have no idea. It might be quite far-fetched. It's not something I really care about all that much in the grand scheme of things, because I'm more into the drama of like what the characters care about and what they're motivated to do, and them surviving, them succeeding. And it has to be said, the performance from Scott Shepherd, who plays David here, is very good. He's a creep. He has that thing where he's speaking softly and you sort of like, there's a monster behind those eyes, and it just gets more overt as the episode goes on. Yeah, like, the moment where he hits the girl and those little flourishes of anger come out, everything obviously with chasing down Ellie, where he just becomes unhinged. And he says, I'm going to be your father now. Like, and that's the thing, like, this is someone who is saying, I'm going to be your father. Now, he means it in the worst possible way because he's a predator and he's going to sexually assault her. But this idea that he's going to force himself on her as her master, basically. Like, let's just call it what it is. Master and slave is the relationship that he wants out of this. This is not like a mutual thing. Unlike Ellie and Joel, if anything, Ellie was the one pushing for the father-daughter relationship in that pairing first. She was trying to break down Joel's tough exterior, and it's become this thing where they both get something out of this relationship. They both care about each other, and David is again trying to take it by force. Even that like title of father, he just takes like it's nothing, like it's just something he can claim. He does it with the girl earlier on. He's kind of done it as a group. He doesn't make all the adults call him father, obviously. But even the fact that he's kind of a preacher, like, what do we call, priests and stuff like that? We call them father, right? That I don't think that's necessarily an accidental connection, because that's actually the one new element in the show is the religious side to David. I don't think there was that, or at least not much of it in the game. It was certainly not a thing I remembered. So this feels like a little element or layer they've added on. It feels like it fits with the character. It feels like it fits. This is a very cynical take, but religion is used to control people. It's used to manipulate and control masses, especially in post-apocalyptic stories. You get a lot of examples of this where, because the world's went to shit and they need answers, they need something to follow again. You get these more zealot like groups of people who believe in, if not the god, a god of some kind. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's just like a tried and true idea in this type of setting, but it does kind of make some sense to me, for him to use the Bible as a way to manipulate people. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of visual moments in here that really stick out. The place on fire at the end, that entire sequence is pretty stunning. Joel seeing the dead bodies in the warehouse or the storage area, when he's looking for Ellie and finds her bag, very creepy, very dark, very sinister. Just obviously there's a little bit of dark humor here or there as well. At least I think if you know what's happening, there's a little bit of dark humor, because I think this idea that early on when the girl says, when can we bury my father, and he says, oh, we can't do it in the winter, we have to wait till spring, and then you realize later they're probably serving him for dinner. I don't know, I have a bit of a dark chuckle out of that, but bit of dark comedies fine with me. I really like, this was something that was in the game as well, but I really like Ellie buying some time by telling them that she's infected, especially after she's bitten David, and the idea is meant to strike fear into him that, oh shit, I'm going to turn. Obviously they debate it a little bit before she acts out, but I do like that as a tactic. Again, I think it shows Ellie's quite smart. I think it's another example of that. And even all the stuff, obviously I wanted to get into all the meteor stuff in the episode, but even just like Ellie going hunting on her own in the snow, it's a really stark visual difference to like the early parts of the story. For those of you who've not played the game, like in the original game, before they added the flashback stuff from the last episode, it actually went from Joel being injured to her in the snow hunting a deer. Like that is the transition in the game. You cut straight to that, and some time has passed. So you don't have a lot of context for where Joel is. Like you literally don't know if Joel is even in the picture anymore. And then when she says, do you have medicine like for an infection, or that may not be the exact line in the game, but when she sort of asks for medicine, you go, oh shit, she's trying to save Joel. And it's kind of like a sort of needle drop kind of moment. Yeah, like I think those moments work really well here. Her trying to sound tough, and she's being fairly strategical. Her refusing to go back to their camp, her sort of trying to trade the deer for the medicine. Like she's making fairly smart plays in a way that it feels like she's probably learned a lot of these ideas from Joel. It's something as simple as she like leans down and empties the guns that the two guys have thrown down. David and James have thrown down their guns, and she like goes over and just makes sure they've got no rounds in them, just in case they do run to try and grab them. They're not loaded. So she's smart, and I think the episode shows that numerous times, and she has to be, because she has to win herself. She has to fight out and win. It's funny, actually, one of the other things I said way back, I don't know, in the early episodes, I talked about I compared love to the fungal virus itself, and talked about how, once you feel love, it's like you've been infected, because you're never going to get rid of it, right? Even if you hate the person, you're never going to not care about them again. I think I did a whole speech about that back in like episode 2 or 3. I think on that subject, this idea that David is just like the virus, and it's kind of what he aspires to be in a weird way. He talks about it, like he's in awe of it. But again, this idea that he's just going to force his way in. So while I compared love to the virus at the start, in that it's this thing that once you get, you can't get rid of, obviously the comparison here to David's probably more apt, in that it's this hostile takeover rather than something that you kind of start to feel. I mean, it's not even that you feel love willingly necessarily. It happens naturally, but it was interesting when he started talking about that a little bit, I thought, because I'd already kind of compared the spread of the virus to love itself. I think what's fascinating to me is just how little there have been of the infected and the clickers and stuff in the show, compared to the game where you have to encounter them constantly because it's a video game. We had them in episode 2, we had them in episode like 5, and that's kind of been it. Other than maybe like just like there was the one in the rubble that Ellie cut or whatever at the start of episode, what, 3 was that? That was just before the Bill stuff. And I'm very curious, actually, knowing where the story goes in the last episode. I'm not sure they're even going to like find a place to put them in the finale, which is kind of weird. If we get no clickers in the last episode, you'd think they'd want a moment with them. There is like a place I could see them putting them in, but like if I was like rating this last episode based on what's in the game, I would probably skip over that stuff. It's not, especially since the last episode's only like 45 minutes. I think the important stuff they need to get to is is important. there is some stuff I'm curious about the finale. There's a couple of things they could seed for the second game that wasn't as seeded in the first game, but could very neatly be more emphasized because they're writing this knowing they're doing a second season and whatnot. I'd be very curious to see what that is. I'll talk about that at the end of the finale review, though. I won't talk about that now. I've seen some debates online about the pacing of the story, and some people thinking that this maybe should have been spread out over 2 episodes and it went too fast. I don't think I agree with that, actually. I think the pacing of this felt good in the sense that it was a complete story. This was the complete story of like Ellie's interaction with David. Maybe you could have extended the episode a little bit to, maybe give it a bit more breathing room between some of the parts, but I would not have extended it to 2 episodes. In fact, episodes 4 and 5, which I would argue is maybe the weakest pair of episodes of the show, it's not a lot, and I love, don't get me wrong, like I loved a lot of things in those 2 episodes, but I actually felt that was maybe stretched out at least given what they did with them, it felt a bit stretched out, and I wouldn't have wanted that to feel like here with David either. We didn't need, a whole episode of Ellie in the cage or a whole episode of like Joel looking for her. I don't think that would have worked. And also, like, I think the other thing about Ellie in this episode is like she kind of unleashes rage properly. I mean, she's a very angry character. She yells a lot, she swears a lot. When she got infected in the flashback, she was smashing glass and stuff. But the way she was hacking at David was very much like she was finally unleashing a rage that had been building up through all of the people that she's lost along the journey, It wasn't just about attacking or killing the person who meant her harm, that tried to do something unthinkable to her. And I think that's partly what makes it so effective, is that Ellie is this confident, wisecracking character. To see her in that position where she does look terrified and she's struggling to get away because what's been threatened upon her is so awful that you almost forget sometimes how young she actually is, because she does carry herself quite well. But at the same time, there's all those little moments in the previous episodes where she doesn't know what an escalator is, or she doesn't know. There's been other examples. I can't think of them, but these little kid-like moments, you go, "Oh, she is still a kid." That again almost has the same effect where it's like, oh shit, this makes this feel even worse, because I know her so well, and I know in the ways which she's grown up too quickly for all the reasons that are obvious, but then I also know the ways that she's still very much a kid who's not been allowed to grow up in the way that she should have, and all of it makes this feel worse. I mean, I think they nailed it. I wouldn't say it's my favorite episode. I still think episode 6 is my favorite episode. I don't think anything will top it this season, just because of what those parts of the story mean to me specifically. But I think the interesting thing about The Last of Us is everyone thinks about going through the city and dealing with monsters when they think of the game. But I would say most of the great memorable story beats come in the last third or the last half, and it's it's the stuff in episode 6. It's this stuff here, and then obviously the ending. That's the stuff that I think makes Last of Us special. It's good before that point, but what makes it great, what makes it special and such a touching story. And when I say touching, I don't even necessarily mean touching in a happy way. I just mean such a moving story is maybe a better phrase. Is that last half of the story, is how it all comes together. Everything does mean something. There you go. That's my thoughts on episode 8. I don't feel like I did that one justice, to be honest, but it's very difficult to talk about a character like this. Hopefully I said something that sounded reasonably smart, but otherwise that's me. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. You can, of course, get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. Although the way Twitter's going, who knows how long that'll be true. But yeah, you can, of course, go to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and support all the content and keep it all coming. And, of course, like, subscribe, ding the bell, all the usual YouTube-y things, because those all help too. But that is me. Thank you very much once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?